Welcome, everyone. I'm Andrew Sommerfeld, and I'm excited to be hosting today's conversation. For this episode, I have the pleasure of sitting down with Dan Beatty, President and CEO of First Hope Bank. Dan brings a thoughtful perspective on leadership, community banking, and the role First Hope plays in supporting individuals, families, and businesses across Northwestern New Jersey. Today, we'll get to know Dan beyond the title, what shaped his career, the values that guide his leadership, how banking continues to evolve, and what excites him about the future of First Hope Bank and the communities we serve. Dan, thank you for joining me today.
Thank you, Andrew. It's a pleasure to be here.
Let's dive in. So, first question on the agenda for today. So, was there a defining moment or turning point in your life or career that shaped the leader you are today?
Sure. I think, I spent 6 years in the Army, so every day was a leadership lesson there, particularly watching leadership during crisis, under pressure when you're hungry and cold. People's real attributes come to the fore. I think the biggest surprise coming back to the bank after being away for probably 12 years was that community banking isn't really about money, it's about trust. And early in my career, I saw situations where, a business was able to grow, or a family was able to stay in their home, or an individual, that was going through a bad time we were able to help them get through that difficult season. And that changes the way you think about leadership. It changed certainly the way I thought about community banking, less about balance sheets and more in terms of thinking about like stewardship and our responsibility to the community. So I think a great example of that early or sort of mid-career, I guess, was PPP. During the COVID pandemic, a lot of our local businesses didn't know if they were going to make it. It's hard to think back to that period and how much uncertainty there was. But many of the businesses didn't know how they were going to make it through it. They were concerned about their own employees and how they were going to get through it. And the government created the PPP program, and we were able to really rally around all of our customers, all of our business customers. And it was all hands on deck at the bank. We were, regularly up until 4 a.m. On the websites trying to get the loans through and to get our funds to our customers so that they could survive that really weird season of life that we all went through together.
Yeah, I still can't believe that was only about 6 short years ago. It's just,
Yeah.
I wasn't here at First Hope Bank, but I do recall those long nights of working on the PPP loans and the communications and all that. So it was a tremendous program and really saved a lot of businesses. So it's
Sure did.
great that First Hope was able to do that for their customers. So let's jump into question number 2. So what personal values guide your decision making? You touched on a little bit on that already, but how do those values show up in the way you lead First Hope Bank?
Sure. I guess I'd say integrity. That's always important, especially in an industry like finance and banking. I already touched on stewardship. And I think a sense of humility. In banking, trust takes years to build. Sometimes we'll have contact with a prospective customer, for years until that time that they're, either upset with their current situation or they have a need that we can satisfy. And then the relationship begins. And some of those relationships have lasted decades, even generations at First Hope, in our 114 years. But that trust can be eroded very quickly. So we've always strived to make decisions that are very sustainable, long-term. We're not looking at the next quarter's profits and what the market's going to think about it. We're making decisions that we know are in the best interest of our customers, our employees, and ultimately our community, so that we can serve the community and help the community grow while not being beholden to, those quarterly numbers. I also, believe on the humility and our leaders should be approachable at every level of the bank. We never want, whether it's an employee, a customer, or a business owner, to feel like the leadership of the bank is disconnected from the realities they deal with every day. Whether those are, budgeting, trying to grow their business, or just the difficulties that people experience, in every day. That could be the inconvenience of, your debit card uh, having fraudulent transactions on it. And, people come into the bank really concerned about that. And we're able to help them out. It's really important that we're approachable in that way. And some humility goes a long way.
For sure, for sure. That brings me right into our excellent segue to our next question. Um, Talking about the mission of First Hope Bank, as the marketing director, we've talked a lot about what the mission statement is of the bank. Can you talk about that a little bit? Talk about what the mission statement is of the bank, and really kind of what talked about trust, how important that is, all of those things, humility, and how does all that shape First Hope Bank and differentiate us from other banks that are out there?
Sure. So, our mission is really to help our communities thrive financially. And that's, our communities of our employees, our customers, our clients, and the community at large. And that's not just through banking products. Um, every bank offers checking accounts, savings accounts, the full gamut. But it's really through the relationships and the guidance and the long-term partnerships that we've built. What makes a community bank different than your mega banks, your national banks, is really proximity and accountability. The people that are making decisions that impact our customers and our clients live here. So, you run
Right.
into them at the grocery store, at little league practice, church, at community fundraising events. And it really creates a different dynamic. It's a different relationship than the traditional like transactional banking model that
Mhm.
when it's somebody in another state that's setting loan policy and somebody in another state than that deciding on a loan. And, when you have a problem and you call, you're maybe getting a call center, not even in the United States, certainly not, you know, being familiar with the voice because every time you call the
Right.
bank, you're getting one of, three or four people. So
Mhm.
I think that, our 114-year history, um, we built that reputation. And we strive to continue that forward. That's what the stewardship is about. Whether that's supporting nonprofits, helping small businesses grow. We have a long history of supporting the local farmers. But it's being there not just when everything's great, but we've been through two pandemics. We've been through a
Mhm.
Great Depression. We've been through a Great Recession.
Mhm.
The high interest rates of the 80s to the zero interest rates of, post pandemic. So,
Mhm.
we've been through it all as an organization. And I think, it's important that the people at the bank have that connection to that long history of the bank and that, some of our customers were, their grandparents were customers of my grandfather. And
Mhm.
hearing those stories, really keeps you in touch with that the importance of being a part of the community, not just, a place people go to cash checks.
Absolutely. So, going off script here a little bit. So you
Sure.
talked about the history of the bank, how it's been around since 1911. Um, what is one of your favorite historical moments, kind of from that history, that really stands out to you, that would define First Hope Bank?
Oh, I mean, there's so many. I don't know. Like the movie It's a Wonderful Life.
Hmm.
My grandparents lived in the bank. It was just
Hmm.
one branch at the time in Hope. And they lived upstairs. And when the Great Depression happened, There was a banking holiday, and then doors opened up, and people, that across the country were concerned about having
Mhm.
access to their funds and their cash. We were trying to stem a bank run. But similar to that movie, It's a Wonderful Life, like people in the community knew that their funds were at First Hope, but they were also at the local farm, at the local cannery, the local grist
Uh,
mill. Um, it was the community bank was really part of the community. It was a cornerstone of the community, the way that, like,
yeah.
the churches and the schools are cornerstones of the community. We're part of all the transactions that are happening. So, when my grandparents had to, uh, put more capital into the bank to keep the bank on sound footing, those decisions that were made. And then I hear stories over the years when I came back to the bank. My grandfather would, um, he would make auto loans, but he was very interested in everybody getting a Ford. He always drove a Ford. It was very important to him. So, that was his first question always. What kind of car are you going to get if you were getting an auto loan? Um, and then as a kid, when my dad retired from the army and we came back to the bank, um, going on inspections with him, the bank would write a mortgage, and we'd stop at a construction site and look at the quality of the construction, and if there were issues, bringing them up to our customer, the borrower, because it's a partnership. um we're lending the money, but we have a vested interest in that house being built well. So
Mhm.
those kind of things,
Mhm.
taking those extra steps that you're not going to get that from a big bank. um
Yeah.
the we talked about PPP. I mean, that was certainly a memorable event for everyone.
Yeah.
um I think those are probably some of the big ones, though.
Yeah. That's great. I love it's part of what drew me to First Hope Bank was what was that history and how it is kind of a cornerstone of the communities that it serves. It's great to be a part of that from the internal side, and I think as an external customer as well to see that. Um, so we talked a lot about kind of that history. So let's talk about the future. Um,
Sure.
when you look 5, 10 years down the road further, what excites you most about the future of First Hope Bank and how it serves these communities?
I mean, I think the biggest thing is that community banking still really matters. In today's day and age of like mergers and acquisitions, you're seeing a lot of small banks getting gobbled up, whether they're being bought by bigger banks or they're merging. Um, I think there's a lot of financial inducement to do that. There's a lot of
Hmm.
reasons,
Yeah.
that makes sense on paper.
Hmm.
Um, I think it's challenging to keep your community bank roots as you grow larger and larger. And at First Hope, we've made a commitment. Because of our capital structure, we're not looking to grow massively. We're looking to keep pace with our community, and grow a little bit every year, expand our community over time. But people still want relationships, and small businesses still want trusted advisors.
Yep.
Communities need institutions like their local bank to remain invested locally and thinking in the long term. So First Hope is trying to combine, our history, as you said,
Huh.
with that
Yep.
looking forward and making investments in technology. Um, Before the pandemic happened, we had already made big investments into taking ourselves from, processing all of our transactions locally to, moving into the cloud, if you will. Um,
Hmm.
we did that in a very purposeful, secure way, but the net result was when the pandemic happened, we were able to shift gears very quickly, And besides having to purchase a few extra laptops because some of our employees only had desktops, we were able to
Right.
send, you know, I think 95% of our associates to work from home right away. And,
Wow.
if we hadn't been able to do that, uh, it will, you know, I, who knows how it would have worked, but, we would have
Yeah.
had big issues with, trying to keep people away from, separated, all the stuff we were doing in the very
Sure.
beginning of the
Yeah.
pandemic. It would have been
Yeah.
very difficult. So,
Hmm.
I think our the investments we've made over time into not just technology but also our reputation, combining those, I think I'd be happy if 10 years from now, um, people weren't just customers of the bank, but they continued to really feel that the bank strengthened the communities that they lived in, and that's what really differentiated us and will continue to differentiate us from bigger banks. Um, we're able to offer all of the technology that the bigger banks offer. Technology is an interesting thing because it sort of level sets. Um, Once a big bank offers online banking, it's like, well, we can do that too, and we're right there offering online banking. We were
Yep.
very quick to offer online banking. If I go back years ago, probably in the 1950s, we were the first bank, I think, north of I-78 in New Jersey to offer uh, drive-through banking. And the general sentiment at the time was, well, why wouldn't you want to, why would anybody want to stay in their car while they're doing their banking through a window? But now, you don't, it's hard to find a bank that doesn't have drive-throughs
Right.
because it's convenient.
Mhm.
And if you're able to offer the convenience that the customer is looking for and maintain your standards of care and how you take care of your customer, then that's great. And if that's what they're looking for and we're able to do that, then we continue to do that. So um, that'd be my hope that we're still
Excellent.
seen as somebody that's
Yeah.
strengthening the communities we live in.
Absolutely. That's great. So closing this conversation on First Hope Bank. So what's one thing you would hope listeners take away from this conversation about First Hope Bank or about leadership? After everything we've discussed, what's the one takeaway for listeners?
Sure, I think ultimately, that community banking is still deeply personal.
Hmm.
At the end of the day, our work is about helping people, um, helping businesses grow, supporting families, strengthening our communities. We need to do all the things that financial institutions need to do.
Hmm.
And some of those are very easy to do and some of them are hard to do, but we need to do them all with care. But ultimately it's those personal connections that set us apart and that are the strength of the bank, ultimately.
Hmm. Yeah.
And the same way I think leadership really at the end of the day is about stewardship. uh, you know uh, in my role right now, I'm temporarily responsible for certainly something bigger than myself. But I think that's true for every one of our branch managers.
Yep.
It's true for you in the market, leading the marketing department.
Yep.
You've got your time in that chair and your responsibility is to leave it stronger for the next generation. Whether that's, the bank as a whole or, your individual relationships with people. It's
Hmm.
important that you're putting uh, your full faith and effort into supporting people, into supporting the community, into taking care of our customers and clients, and that ultimately it's that I don't know what the right word is. It's that ability to strengthen the organization,
Hmm.
to make a difference, and then ultimately to feel good about the impact you've made when you're ready to pass that on. And I think
Right.
that's something also unique about community banks, or really about a lot of small businesses, is
Hmm.
that all the individuals really can make a difference.
Yeah.
Uh, as much as you're a part of a bigger machine.
Hmm.
Um, when 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 the machine is, I don't know, worldwide, it's maybe more difficult to have an impact. But I know that a lot of our employees really get satisfaction out of being able to really make an impact because they're that close to the customer. There's not 18 layers of bureaucracy between the decision
Right.
makers and the customers and communities that we support. So, yeah, I think, community banking is a great place to work. We're always hiring. So we're always looking for great talent. But it's not just a great place to work because of those things, but it's also, it's great people to work with. It's
Hmm.
dynamic. And I think that, there's really a strong need for community banking. And I think that, it'll be around for a long time to come.
I agree. I agree. It's interesting what some of what you said reminded me of. So back in the day, um, in a previous life, I remember one of the stories about Steve Jobs when he was, I think it was the CEO of Pepsi at the time. He was trying to court over to take over Apple, and
Oh,
and he basically said, do you want to sell sugared water for the rest of your life, or do you want to change the world? And
huh.
you know, and it's in a way, community banking does that, and it's in the areas where those banks operate. And I always that one always stuck with me. Making a difference in people's lives. I think is
Yeah.
very important, and I see that here at First Hope Bank. Um, in the people I talk to, my coworkers, the people I talk to as clients, as customers. Um, I think everybody really gets that point and understands it well.
Yeah. I think it's also, I mean, it's along the same vein, but I really enjoy when if I get invited to uh, career fair, career days
Hmm.
at the schools, at the
Yeah,
middle school, high school usually. Um, and they give you your little bio, and certainly some people will ask about my experience in the Army. But I love talking about the bank because um, it's not just banking.
right.
If I'm talking to a group of 30 kids, certainly it's not, everyone's dream to be, an accountant or, a CFO or
Right.
I don't know. I don't even whatever their perception of banking is.
Right.
When they're like, who's this guy that's going to talk to us next? But to be able to talk to them and say like, community banking's great. We have creative people that work at the bank in our marketing department. We have, very like analytical and statistical people working in, the CFO's office in our compliance area. Um, we have folks that are like really concerned about thinking about risk and, in our fraud and our the BSA departments. If you're really into computers, like we have a whole IT department. We have an IT department with I don't know, 6 people now, I think. And part of that's, our investment is we're looking at AI and how maybe we can leverage that so that, we can provide a better service to our customers. We don't want to have AI replace bankers. We don't want to, but if as a tool, I can identify fraud faster, and
Hmm.
keep our
Yeah.
customers safer. If we can use it to analyze, our balance sheet and make the bank more profitable so that we can grow more, we can help our communities more, leverage that. Um, I think that's important, and technology should really make banking more personal and accessible and not try to replace the human,
Right.
the human and the humanity of it. But that's the IT department. We also have, the retail folks. We have sales folks. We have the credit department that's analyzing deals and trying to figure out like you know maybe this deal doesn't work for us right now, but maybe we can go back to the borrower and have a conversation with them and explain to them how, they can improve some of the things they're doing in their business so that, you know, the loan can make sense, or, they can grow. Um, it's just, it's fascinating to come to work every day and not know, what's going to be, what's on the table for the day.
Right.
And who you might have to talk to and partner with. And it's just fun to be able to do that. I'm sure that there are, marketing folks that would love to work at, I don't know, a marketing design agency or something, and work with, like, I don't know, 100 creative people. But I think that there's something magical also about, like, working somewhere where, you're the creative team and you're working with, folks that have a whole different kinds of issues that they need to deal with. How am I going to, market a deposit product, a loan product, and being able to work with a variety of different people, because I think that's,
Yeah,
that's kind of what community is all about. The
absolutely.
communities we live in and we support, there's all kinds of different people, and they all have different challenges. And the unique thing about banking is they all need a bank. So
Right.
we try to be a good partner for everyone.
Absolutely. So you mentioned you like going to career fairs and things like that at schools. So it's graduation season right
Oh,
now. So what's one piece of advice you would give to graduates? Let's say college graduates. What's one piece
mhm.
of advice you might give to them?
Wow. So obviously there's been a lot of talk about the job market right now and
Uh-huh.
how everything's changing. A lot of that may be driven by AI, but I think that regardless of what field you're going into, if you're going into tech or AI, or you're more of a humanities person, um, my advice, I think, to anyone entering the job force, is really to put everything you can into everything you do, which I think, that's pretty standard advice. Like, do everything 100%, because you don't know what you might like or not like. You might end up
Mhm.
like, you don't get the job you thought you were going to do.
Right.
So, you end up doing something a little bit different, but, really commit to that. Because you'll learn something. Maybe you
Absolutely.
learn that you love it and you stay there, or maybe you learn that, hey, I gave this 100% and this is not for me. Um, but I think that that while you're doing that, I think the biggest one of the most important things I'll say is that finding the right people to work with is hugely important. Um, you could be making a lot of money but hate everyone you work with. Or you could be, doing that and, like, it's competition. Everybody's in it for themselves and you're fighting one another. It's a zero sum game kind of environment. And some people thrive in that environment. And that's great. I guess, everybody gets a car, right? And some people like red cars and some people like black cars and some people like fast cars and some people like slow cars. There's something for
Right.
everyone. But
That's
I'll
right.
say that, like, you're going to spend 40 hours a week with the group of people that you're working with. And it's for your own health, for your own satisfaction and sanity. I think it's important to find good people to work with, and find good cultures to work in. Um, and it's important to find, there's a lot of factors, right? I mean, you want to live
Right.
somewhere where you like the community you're living in, and you're satisfied with the type of work you're doing, all that kind of stuff. But ultimately, we're mammals. We like people. We like, everyone needs that kind of connection with other people, and you're going to spend a lot of time with the people you work with. And I think it's really important to find um, a place that you fit. So give it your all everywhere you're at. You always have something to learn, and it helps you make better decisions down the road. But regardless of what you're doing and where you are, I think the people you're doing it with really makes the biggest impact.
Right. Well, thank you. So I really appreciate that. On that note, thank you again, Dan, for joining us today, sharing your story, your perspective, and kind of your vision of First Hope Bank. I really appreciate that. Um, it's clear that community relationships and service really continue to be at the heart of First Hope Bank. Uh, so thank you for that, and thank you to everyone listening. Uh, those that may be listening to this podcast, thank you so much. We hope you enjoyed this conversation, learned a little bit more about Dan, First Hope Bank, and how community banks continue to play a role in our communities moving forward. So until next time, thanks for listening.
Great. Thank you, Andrew. Take care.